Good morning, everybody. That was a fantastic presentation by Ravi, and he has always supported the Healthy Aging Society without fail. Every time we have a conference, he is most willing to give a talk. We actually lost him to Singapore. You know he's a Malaysian. I've got the honor of starting off the plenary session, and I also got the honor of closing the plenary sessions for this conference. And it's an honor for me to introduce the next plenary speaker, Professor Dr. Sharul Baya Kamaruzaman. She knows no introduction. I'm sure the last 3 days, all of you have met her and know her. She is a consultant geriatrician from University of Malaya Specialist Center, University of Malaya Medical Center. Prof. Sharul, as she is often known to, or Prof. Shah sometimes, is a consultant geriatrician at both UMMC and UMSC. She returned to Malaysia in 2002 after her geriatric training in Cardiff, Wales, UK, and she served as a senior lecturer in the geriatric unit, played a key role in the training of refining of the geriatric multidisciplinary team, as well as the acute geriatric care services at UMMC. She embarked on her PhD in 2006 and was awarded a PhD in epidemiology and population health in July 2010. Both her training in geriatrics and epidemiology has been useful in her research actively, namely in the areas of frailty, dementia, falls affecting older people. Her national activities in medical education has led her to her current post, and she is presently the Deputy Dean of Postgraduate Studies at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. Don't tell me how she does it. She's full of life. Huh? All these various clinical teaching and academic roles have helped her cement her commitment to the development of clinical service, aging research, and medical education in Malaysia. She's now presently the president of the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society. I first met Prof. Sharul. I've heard of her. The first time I met her was in Bali when we had our ASEAN conference on healthy aging. And she's so passionate about aging. I think all geriatricians are, but she has now been brought into the spectrum of Malaysian Healthy Aging Society, and we are really honored to have her as the president, and she's really getting the things moving. And as you can see, this conference itself, she got the whole team working with Dr. Bhaskaran and Prof. Tan Maupin, and all of you are here today because of her initiative in many ways as well. And I don't know whether she had an inclination of bringing it to Penang, because she's a Penang girl. So she has got certain reasons for it. So, Prof. Shah, please, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nathan. I might remind you that we met years before Bali. You forgot me. No, not at all. Very briefly, it's a pleasure to know you now. And thank you so much for, actually, I inserted myself in this talk, and I'm trying to think as to why I thought that it would be important for us to know about accelerated aging diseases and what causes them. Let me just go to slide presentation. Accelerated aging. I think everyone's kind of concerned about what this actually means, because it could mean many things to us as in lay terms. Growing old before your time, looking old before your time, feeling old before your time. And also for some who have a medical understanding, it's the biological processes that have changed to actually make you feel that way. But whatever it is, aging is really that slow, progressive, hopefully slow, if it's normal, progressive deterioration of virtually every bodily function over time. Yeah? And ultimately, if you get to live long enough, then that goes over quite progressively until you die. But what's accelerated is what gives me a paycheck every time, that keeps our healthcare alive, and that is disease and the pathological processes that overtake our normal processes of aging. And there are not just internal factors that are at play, there are lots of external factors, as we found. And we probably should look at some of the evidence. I'm not here to go into detail into the evidence, but just to give you a broad concept of what could be at play. So to you and I and everyone else, aging looks different Yeah, it's a personal journey. Some of us age very well, and there are lots of people in this room that have aged very, very well. And it's sometimes in the way that you walk, the speed in which you walk, and what ages you sometimes, it slows your gait as well as other things, your knees, etc., is that thicker waist, having a high BMI, having a higher hip-waist ratio, that increases your cardiovascular risk, that puts you at further risk of further decline. That osteoarthritis, because of that weight of other factors, causing difficulty in going up the stairs. That accelerated muscle loss, as we've heard this past couple of days about sarcopenia, how that is attenuated, so that's increased as you age normally, but certain diseases and certain risk factors and lifestyle things can actually hasten muscle loss, malnutrition amongst other things. And that also affects things like your weight, your grip strength, and then things that affect neurodegeneration, how your brain cells, the longevity of your brain cells, and that can lead to things like cognitive impairment. And as you know, in Malaysia, diabetes is our biggest enemy in that, alongside obesity, hypertension, etc. It's all interrelated. And this is multi-infarct dementia, is the leading cause of dementia in Southeast Asians. And we'll ignore all those risk factors because we're in Penang, and that nasi kandar you had yesterday or the day before may linger a little bit and cause a little bit of a slowing of some brain cells, but hopefully we work it off. And of course, you know, most women and men, I'm told, are quite concerned with the external appearance, the laxity of your skin, which is why I think one of the first plenaries, Tan Sri Ismail Marikan, was outlining, if you caught it, all the various interventions that are out there to anti-age. So all this is a part of fixing all the external side of things. But hey, we need to also look on the inside and see how things are going there, and what are the things that determine how we age. So on to the concept of accelerated aging. Now, there are lots of definitions that you may look up, but it's really the difference between how you're biologically aging and how you're aging in the number of years. And a positive value would indicate that you're biologically older than your numbered age. And the converse is true, where a negative value would indicate that you're biologically younger. So hence the equation of accelerated aging equals biological age minus chronological age. Now that's in the most simplistic terms. And that's how we sort of look at things, because when you have normal aging, and then there's a gray area where you start to age a little bit more because of a pre-existing condition, and then maybe you recover from that, and then you go back to your biological age. But most people, as we found, as they grow older, they don't recover. So once you've got an acute illness, you've got to build up and have that rehabilitation, that nutrition, etc., so that you can then plateau and not decline. And you know, as what Dr. Ravi was saying just now, cancer is one of the biggest causes of this acceleration in aging. So what causes accelerated aging? Many things. Namely, we have to look at our genes, really, because although very, very rare, we know there are signs of aging that can occur, and I'll show you some pictures later of what we call childhood diseases of aging that occur during childhood, like progeria. And then some that actually are the progeria of adulthood, which I'll show you a picture of later. It's quite a very, very rare genetic condition, but it's quite pronounced. It's quite profound. And what they go through looks like real aging. They've got brittle bones, their skin are lax, they've lost their hair, they've turned gray, they've got wrinkles, and then they die. And those who have Werner syndrome, for example, go on to get cancers. And this further accelerates the aging process. And of course, you know very well about Down syndrome. It's a genetic mutation, which the children who get it, they're beautiful, beautiful children, but they go on to have premature aging. They get cardiovascular problems, they have anemia, hemolytic anemia, leukemias, and if they live long enough, they can go on to develop dementia in their older age, but they don't get into geriatric age groups. They don't live very long because of some underlying problems. But I think this is more than 60% of the time, what causes accelerated aging is what we do on a daily basis. Whether we smoke, whether we're a second-hand smoker, whether we live amongst environmental pollutants, living across a factory, drinking the water that's contaminated. All this increases oxidative stress, producing dryness of the skin, wrinkles, etc. For those of you who like a tanning bed or like to go and jamo or go out and do gardening without your sunblock, etc., those are going to alter and damage some parts of your DNA and produce wrinkles prematurely. Of course, alcohol intake will dehydrate you over a long period of time, and not sleeping enough. And those of us who are very preoccupied in our career, taking care of children at night, even taking care of your parents at night, we must take special time and care to ensure that we get sleep. Everyone underestimates the power of sleep, because sleep rejuvenates, and that's so important as we grow older. I mean, it's not just about taking care during old age. We've all got to take care now. I still consider myself young, although I'm entering my 5th decade soon. Environmental pollutants I've mentioned. And of course, what causes you to not sleep very well, run around, is stress. And of course, these, as you know, cause what we call inflammaging, an inflammatory response. Inflammation and aging is a new term called inflammaging. And those are the buzzwords that actually happen biologically, that change us and alter our DNA to a certain extent, that actually affects the processes. We'll talk about some of those processes. Because all this is interrelated, our genes determine the diseases that we get or not get, depending on how we live, and what we consume and what we undergo externally affects our age-associated diseases. So whether you get dementia, even if your parents got dementia, you may not get it if you tip the balance away from the genetic susceptibility towards healthier lifestyle, cleaning up what you eat. Moving away from all those risk factors, it may delay or prevent you from getting this. So it is not an exhaustive recommendation from all doctors that eating, sleeping, reducing stress, it's not for nothing. It's actually true. And science have proved with evidence time and time again. But sometimes it's easier said than done, isn't it? So diabetes, that's another condition. Because you see, I'm diabetic, and you ask them whether they've got hypertension. Surely they do. Diabetics will have hypertension, hyperlipidemia, cardiovascular disease, susceptibility for stroke, have muscle loss, tend to fall, develop dementia later on. So it's an all-encompassing disease that we must listen to, and nowhere is there a higher rate of diabetes and cardiovascular disease than in Southeast Asia. And I hope not on this lovely island of Penang. So I mentioned about accelerated aging diseases, and I think it's perhaps an exaggeration to say these are what embody accelerated aging. But these are very, very rare conditions. So the little boy on the left here on your screen has got progeria of childhood. So it's accelerated aging during childhood due to a genetic instability in the gene. And that has caused some protein dysregulation in the DNA, and he has got what we call progeria of childhood. And the young lady at the top right that you see has got Werner syndrome, and this is a progeria of adulthood, where you get from adolescence to middle age a really rapid incline of aging signs. And in the middle you see a young lady with Down syndrome, and we mentioned what those manifestations of aging that occur. And we're talking about environmental, external factors. And if you look at the men, they're not the same, they're twins. And you can guess which one of them are aging a lot more than his twin due to smoking. And perhaps some other social factors, socioeconomic issues, stress. Twins, you may be joined at the hip, but you may not endure the same life or life experiences. So, external factors do play a role, despite twin studies saying that they experience a similar genetic susceptibility, but external factors do play a role. And of course, we mentioned dementia early. So why are we interested in this? Why should we be interested? And why is this the topic of the plenary? Because if you look here, we have gone through a massive, or are going through a massive accelerated aging in our population pyramid. Just back in 2000 on the population pyramid on our left. 20 years ago, we were actually a pyramid. But in a short 13 years, where we will achieve aging nation status, we're like a middle-aged, round in the middle, that looks like a cardiovascular apple-shaped body. And that doesn't bode well for us because we have more middle-aged and older population who will go on to develop dependency and disability if we don't work on how to healthily age in the future. So this is, projections which are coming true sooner rather than later. But we're not all the same, are we? We age differently. There's no typical older person that ages in a similar way because we're unique. And we all have our own preferences on how we exercise, what we go through, how we undergo stress, whether we're susceptible to certain risk factors than others. So we've actually got a big challenge to look into trying to get the key to unlock what is healthy aging and how do we decelerate aging and age as we should biologically younger than our chronological age. And this is by looking at some determinants of what healthy aging is about. And specifically looking at maybe on a molecular level, what's going on in our DNA on a cellular molecular level. What are the disruptions that are going on there? We get born with sets of chromosomes which are perfect, God-given. Some may have certain susceptibility to diseases, but there are certain external, such as social determinants of health, that can actually dampen down those susceptibilities. And like diabetes, even if your parents got it, doesn't mean that you're 100% going to get it. It all depends on how you manage that, because less than 5%, 1 to 2% perhaps, have the gene that is so strong that you will get diabetes for sure. And of course, looking at how these factors also affect the brain is one way at looking at how to decelerate aging, because it's not about how you look, but how you think and how you appear. So brain factors are also very important. And of course, the environment around us determines how we age, healthily or not. And of course, your health in older age is not as random as we think. It's not like a lottery. You were born with a genetic inheritance for certain genes. We are who we are based on our culture, values, religion, etc., and the society we live in. We are determined on how we behave by where we choose to live or where we end up living, and those are social determinants. And all those things wrapped around, and the family in which, and the environment in which we grow, actually determines how we behave towards health, our own health. And of course, our own access, and this is very important, and this is a topic of a lot of our sessions throughout the whole conference, is our access to healthcare. Is it there? Is it equal? How to make it equitable? Because people who are not getting the same access, the same chances, having the rights to good healthcare without having to pay a ton, is a big factor that actually accelerates the aging process for some who cannot get treatment for these age-related or age-associated diseases. So it's not random. We can actually modify this. So it's so important for us to understand that these are the issues at hand. But if you look closer, if you look right down under the microscope and look at our genetics, look at our chromosomes, looking at certain changes that occur within our cells, looking at our immune system and how we respond, and looking at all the factors that affect our mitochondria, all these multiple factors, genomic instability, telomere attrition or telomere shortening, these are buzzwords that are going on, have been going on in the past few decades, that actually try to explain certain mutations in our chromosomes, our DNA, some alterations that have occurred that may explain the key to how aging occurs prematurely in some cancers, for example, in some mutations such as the conditions like we showed earlier, progeria of childhood and adulthood. And I'll just go through quite briefly on what that actually means. So we talked about the genetic instability. So this was with regards to the Hutchinson-Gilford progeria, which is childhood progeria, and then Werner syndrome, which occurs in adolescence and adulthood. And this is where the mutation affects the cellular energy that leads to cell death, fibrosis, impaired protein processing that results in all this breakdown and accelerated aging. And then you have on the other side is to do with loss of chromatin, which is unstable with a high mutation rate that causes some early cancers in adulthood in these affected adolescents. So this is all genetic alterations and disruptions that can occur at birth. But let's look at another phenomenon, telomere length or telomere shortening and its relationship with accelerated aging. So telomeres are specifically DNA protein structures that are at both ends. If you look at our chromosomes, it's like a little butterfly. I'll show you a picture later. And the tips are where these DNA protein structures reside. And the longer they are, the better longevity and health you have. And in certain conditions like cancer, certain disease states, and certain exposures to environmental pollutants and other lifestyle factors, this can shorten your telomere length. And there have been some, in fact, Prof. Tan Maupin's LRGS study looking at cognitive frailty that we're involved in, and some of your volunteers that you met here today are looking at genetic properties of, the telomere lengths amongst our super agers in our Malo study, our Malo population, which we have a cohort of older people. And we're looking at those who are over 90. And we will be looking at their chromosomes to see whether their telomeres are short or long, and to sort of have a Malaysian data to see whether this is actually, in theory, true amongst Malaysians. If it is, then that's great. But if it isn't, then it must be what we eat and how we live. So we'll watch that space and wait for that publication. Very excited about that. So a normal cellular process, the telomere length decreases with age. That's normal. And as you can see, there's a rate that's given per year, which has been measured on average. However, the length is shorter than average for a specific age group. It's been associated through conditions that have been measured, such as diabetes, etc., cancer. And this is related to decreased lifespan for human beings. But a combination of factors, as I mentioned, not just your age, but the epigenetic makeup, which I'll explain about later, and the environment, social, economic, exercise, body weight, and smoking. Strangely, although we hear that women tend to live longer than men, I'm sure that's for other reasons, gender does not seem to have any significant effect on the rate of telomere loss. So men, you still have some time left to actually correct the situation. So we got to figure out what is wrong here. When telomere length reaches below a critical limit, then the cells tend to undergo senescence, aging, or cell death, apoptosis. So you can look up this publication to read up. It's quite an interesting article. And these are your chromosomes. And the tips that are colored is your telomere length. So the long telomeres, if you look on your left in green, are what's associated with health and normal longevity. And due to intrinsic factors, whether you have abnormal cell division, DNA damage, inflammatory conditions, that can actually cause shortening. And of course, the environmental factors are also a part of it that cause age-related diseases and reduced longevity. Some therapies have been thought to actually help maintain this length in telomeres, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more data that needs to come out, and these are just anecdotal at the moment, but we will need to sort of see how this progresses in time. This is a recent publication. Epigenetics. This is something that I found out with regards to how to turn back the clock on aging, how to turn back the clock on being frail. And this is a mechanism that looks at how the environment changes the behavior of our genes. Now that's kind of, that captured my attention really. And looking down into the basics of it, it is really to do with a process called methylation, where a chemical that floats around in our body, our cells, attaches itself to our DNA. So it's so important what we expose ourselves to, because it really does affect our DNA and can modify this. So either it turns it up or turns it down, and it creates this protein process and affects how we react and how we manifest in terms of diseases. I'll give you an explanation. But this kind of shows you where you can actually, this is a graph of someone with cancer that has undergone age acceleration versus age deceleration upon treatment of that cancer. So it's a balance, and they are able to map this out through this article that was found in Cancer Research quite a few years, well, recently 2 years ago. And this is part of the Human Genome Project, which has been published by Spector et al. At King's College London. And it's about epigenetics and how you turn back the clock on frailty. And they did some twin studies, and they looked at these paratwins because there's no closer genetic comparison than a pair of twins. They may have different tolerances to pain, but they have different rates of methylation, this process. And the genes that are switched on in one twin are switched off in another. And then they found out that, you know, this twin is more likely to get this disease versus that disease. So it really has to do with how the environment, the diet, the lifestyle, the exposure, the drugs that you take can affect how this process attaches to your DNA and turn it down or turn it up, causing the genetic behavior to change. So this is just a picture of this a pair of twins and how individuals, although they have identical genes and very similar condition, are quite different because of different life outcomes. You know, one is a smoker, one's got a bit of a harder life and are exposed to a lot more, maybe didn't live so well and developed certain diseases that caused her to change very significantly differently to her own twin. And let's not forget the importance of the immune function, because our immune function, and with COVID amidst us right now, it's so important to see who are the ones that are vulnerable at getting COVID. Incidentally, I'll let you know that I recovered from COVID myself on the 8th of March. And it's taken a beat. I took a beating. I'm upstanding, but it has kind of fatigued. I don't know whether it's the conference stress or what, Prof. Nathan, but it does affect you. So it's so important in the recovery phase, in preparation against developing such a condition, that we dial down. And during the quarantine is no better time to actually assess, what am I eating? How have I been dealing with my stress? Have I been restricting on my roti canais and nasi lemaks, etc.? Am I moving about as much as I can? Is work getting to me? Am I sleeping enough? Am I having certain life vices that I need to stop at this age? Am I exercising? So all that and a suboptimal nutritional status contributes to a compromised immune function. So we all know this, but what do we do about it? And this is just, how genes, your immunity, the inflammation that is caused by certain environmental or other factors contribute to aging, affect the immune system, and cause what we call a chronic antigenic burden and inflammation plus aging, inflammaging I mentioned earlier, to get what we call an aging immune system, immunosenescence. And this can give rise to age-associated diseases. So it's all about a balance, and this is about really how frail you get, no matter at what age. And this starts early on. It can start in your 30s to 40s. So you saw in the plenary that Dr. Alan Chung spoke about on the first day. And it's about trying to tip the balance away from frailty. And it just takes very little to actually, for those who are challenged, from independence to dependence. So it's about functional reserves. And I mentioned it is a fine balance because you may have, if we take a condition like dementia, the ApoE gene or other genes that contribute to having dementia early. Even if you have that gene, even if you test that gene, will you get dementia at the end? We need to assess those risk factors, balancing out the protective factors. If you work really hard at improving physical activity, eating really clean, I feel a bit like a hypocrite because I didn't really eat clean yesterday because we're in Penang. But more times than not, education, improving your social connections. I see an older gentleman in our midst, and I'm so happy because you're my role model, sir, because you are, you're here at an educational conference wanting to learn more, because learning and activating your brain cells does not stop. It should not. And of course, making social connections that are meaningful. The pandemic has affected us somewhat, but we've got to fight back. And that actually helps preserve our brain reserve and against diseases, age-related diseases like dementia, diabetes, and the like. So frailty can occur as early as, I say, is 40 here, but I think, the average Southeast Asian, it might be even earlier. Because we've done papers that have looked at our average attendees to our clinic kesihatan. We've published one with my master's student and found that 58% of hypertensive, diabetics, hyperlipidemia, those who have underlying heart disease, have already an existing mild cognitive impairment. And this is on neuropsychological tests. And when we check, this is a pre-dementia situation. Because if they don't get sorted at this early age within the clinics that they see in the GP clinics, they will go on to come to our memory clinic in the next 8 to 10 years. So it's also, I mentioned about dementia, it's also about muscle loss. And this is all interrelated, and this accelerates us to that, wrecking ball of aging and becoming dependent and disabled. So it's about being inactive, diseases, inflammation I mentioned, the cellular dysfunction, poor nutrition, poor circulation, all that can have risk factors towards that we can actually do something about. Nutrition is very, very much a key. And we've heard about sarcopenia. I think you had Dr. Terence Ong that spoke on the special symposium yesterday that talked about the importance of maintaining muscle mass as well as performance in order to cut this down because it's related to a lot of adverse outcomes at the end of life and even towards death. I love this one because actually this is really, I say this is about dementia, but this is about any age-associated disease, really. And this is what healthy aging is all about. It's about looking after your heart. It's about moving, never stop moving. I've got my idols here, Prof. Nathan, Datuk Bhaskaran. Gosh, how you challenging Dr. Wong? You're still too young. But you've challenged me. You've really challenged me that you don't stop, never stop. You got to keep moving, and you got to keep your mind active. Unfortunately, going out with all of you tends to make me eat a little bit worse, but it's still important to balance it out on yourself, challenge your brain, enjoy social activity, a bit challenging at this time, but don't stop reaching out. And when your grandchildren, your children want to take you out, never say no. Go out, follow SOPs, but really get out there, meet friends, and that will actually maintain your turning back the clock or stopping the clock for as long as possible, really. And that is really the true key. And these are all the advices for you doctors here and our allied health professionals. This is what, we come out with so casually in our clinic. But it really does carry a lot of weight, and it still holds true till today. And with that, some key points here. So healthy aging is about achieving our biological age potential. We all have it in us. And the point here is, it's never too late. Even though you've been hit by disease or you've been hit by certain healthcare challenges, you can get back and plateau out. You must never stop. External factors play a huge role, and these can affect our genes and how we express it. That's been evidenced. It is important to know what it is that we need to do to tip that balance to being more engaged in how we protect ourselves against all these age-associated diseases. And never has it been true that lifestyle is everything. It does play a big, big role, and eventually affects the pace in which you age. And these are some of the examples. And I thank you for your time, and I'd like to welcome any questions, and Prof. Nathan will moderate that.
Hello, can you hear? Yeah. Thanks very much, Prof. Sharul. I mean, obviously what she has given us is the epitome of healthy aging that all of us should follow. But let's open the floor to questions. Anybody got any questions that would like to ask Prof. Sharul? She doesn't charge, yeah? So please. Prof. Sharul, can I let me kickstart this. You mentioned about genetic inheritance. The DNA that plays a part too, but your immune system is so important. But will you say that health behavior is the most important thing?
Absolutely, because it's those health behaviors that formulate the external factors that go on to alter your cellular mechanisms and genes eventually. So yes, you're absolutely right, that is the most important thing.
So how do we educate, I mean, all the healthcare professionals is here, and I think we are supposed to play the role in relation to this, but how do you educate? I mean, one of the things that I was just talking to Dr. Wong, what worries me after your lecture is looking at the B40 group. Obviously, they, obviously, I mean, one of the things you brought up is nutrition. And obviously, if you look at some of the studies that have been done, the nutrition of these people are much lesser, right? Because of economic situation and all. How do you think that we could play a role in advocacy in relation to this?
We have many roles to play. You here as individuals, if you're part of a community, you're all part of a community, you're all part of an NGO or a working group, etc. So the beacon of healthy aging can play its role in any of those things. But I think what's most important to play a big change, especially to the population that are a lot more vulnerable, the B40s, for example, is to affect policy. So sugar is in everything we have. And you ask what teh tarik kurang manis, it comes, wow, it's amazing at the inability of our day-to-day cheap food on the street that has over these past few decades increased in process, in white sugar content, in white flour, all those things that we have available in schools, what we're feeding our children, what's available at our local eateries, our mamas, etc., has actually encouraged accelerated aging in a way that has caused childhood obesity, that goes on to early diabetic adolescents and adults, higher rates of dementia. So it's about policy. And actually, as our NGO, I'm proud to say, will hopefully play a big role in trying to get into each community as an NGO, working together with other stakeholders in putting out the message that we really need to, if we want to make healthcare accessible, we've got to put out the flames that are actually, causing a more impoverished part of the population more at risk of developing all these conditions.
The other thing that you brought out about social activity, I mean, obviously one of the reduce in social activity, the linkage to dementia, is it possible?
Yeah.
Right. And I'm worried now, looking at the older population, because of the 2 years of lockdown, whether there's going to be, it'll be nice to do a study to see whether there's a thing linking out to. What's your view of intermittent fasting? I know we have talks on this, intermittent and fasting and meditation in helping to reduce accelerated aging.
I think different types of restricted diets needs to be assessed about its suitability for you as an individual. Because if you're diabetic, it may sort of rebound on you, especially if you're on medication. It needs to be more prescriptive rather than a mass movement that's a fad or dietary fad. It needs to be monitored because, you know, as I said earlier, people age individually, differently, and therefore certain, you know, it works, I must say, when it's monitored.
Right. So the key message is to make sure your family doctor monitors you.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that's important factor to look at. Anyone else has got any questions? Yeah, Dr. Bhaskaran.
Actually, I didn't want to say much, Prof, but because you are the doctor who took care of me, so I need to say a few words. You know, being a medical doctor, we think that we know everything. But once you get into the particular hospitalization like last year, you realize there are so many things that we don't learn. But the greatest thing that when you are in hospital or you're being cared for, you need very compassionate doctors, health workers, and also caregivers. And I had all three of them together. So my recovery, despite the fact I had such a tough time, you know, I'm a very social active. After the few things she mentioned, social activity, I'm very good. And kicking myself, enjoying myself, I'm very good. But one or two things that she said, I'm sorry, I've not been able to follow through, Prof, so I hope you forgive me. But there are two things I just want to stress here. One is, if you have a very good caring team in your house, in your hospital, and anywhere else, you recover much faster. But if you have someone who is not able to take care of you, because it's a very difficult proposition, Prof. So I think the two things the government is missing out here. One is the caregiver is not easy because all of us are working, all of us family, you know, you want to be with your parents and all that, but it's difficult. Like she meant dementia, that caregivers is a very important aspect in Malaysia right now. But the government till now has not approved the caregiver services in this country. I don't know why and what is going to happen to this country because they think they know everything as usual. I mentioned this many times to many of my minister friends. I said, look, caregiver is a very important. Second thing is, all of you who have come here, I think you have learned something, or we have learned something today. Go back and ensure that this message is passed on to others who missed out this thing. Though we have record 1,108 participants coming here, I think a lot of work was done by the team. The other thing is becoming members of the society. The larger the number, the voice will become stronger. And when President Sharul is there, I think when she talks about it, she can say with confidence, we have this number, and the people are with us, and we are running these courses and all that. So please go back and become members, because we can't appeal to you all the time, but we still keep appealing to you. So all I want to say is, if we found this conference to be very interesting and very useful, become members of the society, and then pass the good word around about the society that we're doing such activities. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaskaran, and thank you for the...
Prof. Shah,
you've got one question? Or we...
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
Prof, good morning. I'm Oi, I'm occupational therapist.
Hi.
Prof, can you share with us how you overcome a family conflict among the siblings? One party say, Mom, Dad, you please sit more, don't move more. Another party say, no, Mom, you have to live active life. So how you overcome when you facing all these family conflicts?
When there are two opposing parties, it's always good to bring in the third party, which is a healthcare physician or geriatrician or whoever that you're seeing, because one message is clearly wrong. And it was born out of fear of mom or dad falling, injuring themselves. But if they understand that, with love, support, understanding that sitting still and not moving, both physically and mentally, destroy them towards old age and make it a lot more difficult. So what I tend to do in my clinic is that, my brother says this, my sister doesn't let my mom do anything. We call them together and we explain what's good for mom and give mom or dad a voice. What do they actually want to do? How do they feel? And work with that. Because at the end of the day, it's not what about you as siblings, what you want. It's going back to that person-centered care. What does the old person want? They might not want to move, but they need to also hear it, that they actually need to move for their life's sake. Because you don't move, you die. Literally. Yeah? It's that important.
Thanks.
I hope that answered the question. And I think we've
Thanks,
kind of run out of time.
there are two questions online. Can I just throw that question?
Sure.
One is, I have read that stress under homocyst concept can improve the aging process. What is your opinion on this?
Stress under?
Homocyst concept can improve the aging process.
Well, there's always a good kind of stress and a bad kind of stress. And with anything in life, there's balance. Some people work to a deadline and, adrenaline keeps them moving. But if you push your adrenaline and your cortisols and your stress hormones up, you actually tip your balance, if it's too high, towards conditions like diabetes. You lose out on the reserves of your pancreas, your liver, your brain cells. So again, whilst good in concept, in theory, in practice, I think there's always a balance in life.
Professor, there's one more question online. What do you mean by clean eating? Is it all Malaysian food unhealthy? Or we can still eat our curry and nasi lemak? If we cook at home with salt and sugar, amount is in our control.
Yeah. I think, as wonderful as Grab, Food Panda, which are at my fingertips these days, they have actually, compared to the early days, also allowed for a lot of healthy choices. Eating at restaurants, you do have a choice. At the end of the day, we have a choice. We have a choice of whether we want to cook. We have a choice as to whether it's cheaper to eat at home. If we go to a restaurant, we also have a choice as to how much we eat, the portion that we take, and in what kind of portions. We also have the knowledge, and this is what health literacy and educating the B40 is about, knowing that foods that we don't prepare ourselves, we cannot control the amount of sugar, salt, and preservatives that are in it. So all these actually, we need to actually, as through our society and meetings like this, heighten in awareness. So, Malaysian food can be healthy if taken in moderation and with a content awareness, which is why it's very, very important. I've been involved in the Malaysian Dietetic Association conferences, the M&As, and they are very, very good at highlighting which types of food. And a char kway teow can be very healthy. You'll be surprised. But the ones you get at the street corner, Lorong Selamat, not so, which we had yesterday.
You just made me feel guilty.
Oh no, it's not about feeling guilt, because you know what is the biggest inhibitor to healthy aging? Guilt. You got to know, you got to actually educate, know what because you're in control. It's down to you, really. I'm giving this advice to myself. I'm not preaching. It's down to you, really. It's your choice. It's your body. It's your knowledge. Now you've all gained the knowledge, so go forth and preach to yourself first, and then we can actually, get better at it.
So basically,
I'm still trying. Work in progress.
So basically, healthy aging is in your own control.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
And this is a message I think the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society is trying to preach to people.
Thank you, Prof. Nathan.
Okay, last one, please. Mr. Tille is looking at me already on time.
A very short one.
Sure.
I'm Dr. Bibiana. I'm a pediatrician
Hi, Dr. Viviana.
from Sarawak.
Sarawak, yes.
Yes, just a related question concerning food. Are there any attempt to pressure the manufacturers of beverages and all that to reduce the sugar content, and also for some of the food like instant noodle to reduce the salt content.
So it's all about policy and how we change it, and who governs policy and the political will. I'm sorry, I'm going to be very frank here. The minute there's an election up, then sugar prices go down. Salt things, you know, it really is something that we, the people, need to speak up. We are healthcare professionals. We need to speak up for, you know, the importance of maintaining a healthy diet, what this means, etc. And therefore, we, you know, it's important. That's why we invite politicians and policymakers to our conferences, because we do need to work together, because you don't realize that when you are actually appeasing people with high sugars, processed stuff, and making those things affordable, but important things like fruits, vegetables, fiber, etc., more expensive because it's organic, now that's really killing your population. So we've got to really work hard on policy.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Prof. Shah. It was a fantastic presentation, and I'm sure all of you would like to show your appreciation to the usual manner.
Thanks.
Mr. Tilley?